All right, fellas and ladies, we're here to talk about chapter number 16 of the campaign called Brand, If Nikke Got Us a Victory. So at this point, we find ourselves up on the surface, and if you remember from a few weeks ago, we're here to find Vapis, and Sayun was going to help us, quote unquote. So we're finding ourselves in an area with 100% alpha particle concentration, so there's absolutely no communications available. But Sayun did send some help. She sent Exotic, and if you remember Exotic, oh boy, here we go. Ainz mentions that she's very concerned. She's more concerned about them stabbing us in the back than the Raptures attacking us. And then Viper promises she's on her best behavior because Sayun promised to take off the collars if they were successful in this mission. After a Rapture battle, Viper and Jackal are in heaven. They love shooting as much as they want and going crazy. Ainz gets into it with Crow about terrorism versus freedom fighters, and they go back and forth for a while before Rappy finally shuts it down. Later, we find Ainz in a contemplative mood. We talk to her about what Crow was saying and how she is sympathetic to the whole point and the idea because she doesn't think Nikkes get treated correctly, and she doesn't like humans that much, to be honest, besides us. So she's not completely like asympathetic about the whole thing with the Outer Rim and whatnot. And she talks about how Nikke's, they spend their whole lives going to the surface while humans just chill and enjoy their life. And then we promise her that we'll return her to life like a human. She gets very concerned because the central government thinks that anyone who espouses Nikke rights are guilty of sedition. But we say, don't give a fuck about that, because we don't, because we have Nikke love all of us. And she just warns us to be careful. Later on, as we're traveling around in the north, because that's the last place we saw Snow White, where we're up trying to like figure stuff out. Jackal steps on some ice and then plummets in the water because Nikke's are heavy as shit. So we drag her out and then we give her a jacket to warm her up. Crow warns Jackal that this is just a trick, and then she insults the counters for all their trust in us, which they get super fucking mad about. They tell her to back the fuck off. She scoffs, and we continue on. Then then Neon and Crow get into it for a bit. Raptures attack, and right as we think we're done with the whole situation, a Rapture fires at us. Crow shoves us down. We check on her to make sure she's okay, and she's like, you gotta quit faking like you care. Ainz gets super pissed off, but Rappy and the commander calm her down before she can do anything. Everyone keeps looking for more hidden Raptures until finally the area is clear. We speak to the counters about what Crow has been talking about. They back us up and convince us that we actually do care about them and look for them, and that they appreciate it, and that Crow doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. And that all the ways that matter, in all the ways that matter, that we look out for them and we care for them and protect them, just like they protect us in combat. Because that's one of the not qualms. One of the things we have an issue with is that we're unable to help them. But they're like, no, you help us in all the ways that matter. A bit later, the alpha particle concentration breaks, and we get a message from Sayun. She mentions something about another squad or about some help, and then a favor she called it from Ingrid, and then Viper's looking over her shoulder and tells us that they are the patrol squad that got sent out because they patrol the Outer Rim, right? And so already you're like, wait a second, this is shady as shit. But she doesn't know anything about the Ingrid thing, and she says it with a sly smile because she's definitely hiding something. Eventually we get to the last location where Snow White was patrolling, and we have a 3-hour window where Snow White is supposedly seen here that we got information from Ludmilla and Alice. So we split up. Exotic goes one way, we head off the other way and start searching. We then follow Exotic in the story, and they find a rest stop where the pilgrims have recently been. They find some, food canisters and some other things that show that someone has been kind of chilling out here. They also find a map, and then Crow sees it, and she comes up with a plan because she wants to punish us. And Viper's like, why do you want to punish him? What's going on? And then Crow tells her that she's too concerned with getting caught in danger and that she needs to live that YOLO lifestyle. At some point, Jackal comes running up to get us to take us back to this bunker that Exotic found. Inside, we find the map, and there's a big X by a lighthouse there. Rappy mentions to us that it's probably a trap, and that Ainz and Crow get into it again. But we decide we're going to trust Exotic, which makes Jackal super happy. Rappy determines that it is too late, so we decide to rest here for the night. While we're resting, we notice Crow looking at something on her phone. She shows us an article about Nymph and Vapis, and there's this guy, John, who's in the news, and he's talking about Nikkes. And he talks about when Nikkes lose their Nymph, they're going to turn on humans. And she states that if we find Vapis, we will not be seen as a hero. We state that we don't care, that our only concern is helping Nikkes, and that we can figure out the rest later. Crow's still fucking super skeptical about the whole situation. She makes some passive-aggressive comments towards us. The next day, Crow invites us to continue our conversation from the night before as we continue on our way. We discussed that the Nikke reaction to Vapis, what's it going to be like, how Nikkes are going to respond. She thinks that Nikkes will just keep doing what they're doing because they've been brainwashed and trained like animals. We agree to some extent with her, but we want to help them through the process, help them realize their humanity again and be able to live the lives they want to live without feeling like servants or feeling like they have to make these choices. She mentions that if she had met us earlier, maybe things would have been different. And we're like, what? And she's like, maybe I would have been good like the counters. And we tell her that, times can change and that you can always make a different decision. And she's like, nope, no, there's not. I will never change. Eventually, we start seeing a moving light. Neon thinks it's a ghost, but Rappy identifies it as a lighthouse, so we get closer, and at that point, we get ambushed by Raptures, including a bunch of Tyrant class. Exotic's not used to fighting Tyrant class, so of course they back us up. And they ask if we trust them, and we're like, yeah, of course we trust you. So the fight begins. After the fight, the counters are pretty turned up, like they're injured, they have like injury reports, broken limbs, all this kind of stuff, because Exotic did not back us up. Instead, they fled over to the lighthouse. And so while we make sure the girls are doing okay, and then we head over to the lighthouse to make sure Exotic's okay. And at that point, we get flashbanged. Then Jackal comes over and blasts the counter, so they're even more injured. And then Viper puts the gun to her head. Crow talks about how she can't let us live because we've ruined her plans. And because we actually want to help Nikkes and humans get along better, and she has no interest in that at all. And we give Nikkes hope, so if we give Nikkes hope, they're not going to rebel like she wants. And she can't have any of that because the revolution is violent and it must begin. She then tells us that her hatred has made her strong, and that even though Nikkes can't attack humans, that she is able to break the brainwashing. At that, using some tricks. So at that point, Jackal puts a metal plate on the ground, and then Crow is able to ricochet a bullet that hits us. Meanwhile, back at the Ark in Missless headquarters, Mattis is watching and commenting about the news broadcast. This John guy that Crow showed us about before, he's trying to get people to really turn on Nikkes without a nymph and make it seem like a threat, and that Missless is a lot of the problem here, and they're pretty upset about it. Elsewhere, Sayun is beating on Uni because she's mad about the news report and she's an asshole. She's also complaining to Rion, her assistant, who's been in NPC jail for the entire game existence. As of 2025, mid-2025, she's still not released. She then explains that there's a signal that John is coming from the Outer Rim, so that it clearly has something to do with some sketchy Heavenly Ascension stuff or whatever. Sayun asks about Exotic, we need to get Exotic over there and send him over. But Exotic's not in the Outer Rim, they're on the surface. And she's like, the fuck? How are they on the surface? They gotta be with the commander. And then Rion mentions that they must have left with us. And Sayun's like, what? I didn't tell him to do that. Why would he take them? Which clearly shows that they snuck out on their own and been fucking around this whole time. And that there was another squad that was supposed to go with us. A while later, Exotic is back in the Outer Rim, celebrating. Crow is a bit upset. She fires away at Jackal, who runs away and hides, because Jackal's like, no, we're dead. We've got to be dead. The commander's got to be dead. And then Crow's like, what do you think, Viper? And she's like, I don't know. And she's like, what do you mean? And she's like, he survived numerous 0% chance survival missions, destroyed all these things, the whole counters, the whole thing is sketchy. There's no way that he's actually dead. And Crow's like, I agree. In fact, I hope he's alive because I want a rematch and I want his despair to be at max. Dun dun dun. That's the end of chapter 16. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later.